Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this online event from Hacking HR. We are really glad that you could join us. We are obviously part of the Chicago chapter, and we are very grateful that you could be a part of this morning. If you were with us on May 8th, you noticed that we had a great event with the folks from BTS, and today we have what I think is going to be a really outstanding presentation for you, and I hope that you find it as beneficial as I know we are going to. And I'm going to apologize up front. If you see me looking back and forth, it's because I'm letting people in to the room. But I want to share a few things with you this morning, and I want to just get you prepped and ready to go for today's event. So the first thing that I'm going to do is we are going to go through some things, just some housekeeping things for Hacking HR, and bring you up to speed on what you can expect, not just today, but also over the course of the day. Now, before we get started, I do want to let you know that we are very well aware that COVID is still pretty prevalent in our communities. We also know that there are a lot of other issues going on in our communities right now that are adding extra tension to your lives, to our lives, to everybody's lives. And we want you to know that we are thinking of you. We don't want to appear to gloss over anything, but at the same time, we want to give you things that you can take back to your companies as they begin to reopen, as Illinois is. Now, some of you may be joining us from other parts of the country, but as Illinois begins to open, we officially open downtown today. Things are going to begin to change. And we would like you to know that there are tools available. There are things out there that Hacking HR in whatever community you're in will continue to bring to you to make sure you're as prepared for reentry into the workforce, into your regular lives, I guess is the best way to say that. So again, welcome to Hacking HR. I want to take you through just a couple of things. My name is Ron Gauthier. I am the managing director of a boutique RPO here in Chicago called HireWorks. I'm also very honored to be whoops, I just found out we have a note issue here. Okay, thank you, Heidi. And let's try that again. Better? Did I get it right this time? Okay, cool. So you get to see all of my notes. That was awesome. At any rate, as I said, my name is Ron Gauthier. I am the managing director of an organization called HireWorks. I'm also very lucky to be a partner in the Chicago chapter of Hacking HR. It's been a great experience for me. I've been a part of this for almost 2 years, and I have continued to learn as I've moved along in this organization from people like our presenters today and other people that we've had here. And I think if you are thinking about being a part of it, this is an organization where you can get some real benefit out of that. Now, I want to talk a little bit about our event today. We have Dr. Angela Jeffrey and Dr. Adam Massman who are joining us from JLL. They're going to talk about how to pivot toward success in really tough times. And I think this is a really good example of really tough times. And I think you're going to find their strategies and the things that they talk about as real benefits to you as you begin to move forward. Now, additionally, I'd like to just talk to you a little bit about Hacking HR. About 2.5 years ago, a gentleman by the name of Enrique Rubio started on a mission to create what he believed was the best version of HR, a true business partner for the business units that only HR could provide. And as that has begun to grow and begun to expand, we've seen chapters all around the world spring up in countries from one end of the globe to the other. We've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of partners join Enrique's effort, and we hope that you will continue to be a part of this. Now, coming up in July, on July 22nd, we have an event. It's really, I think, very, very important for a time like this. It is talking about employee wellness. There are going to be challenges as we all come back to work about how we do that. There are going to be challenges about how people feel about doing that. And we hope that this event will help bring some clarity to that and give you strategies. It's going to be a great day brought to you by our good friends over at Launchways. And there are some absolutely amazing panelists who will be a part of that event. That is pretty much our spiel for today. What I'd like to do right now is I'd like to take a minute, and I would love to introduce you to Dr. Angela Jeffrey. She will be taking care of the event from the rest of the way forward. Now, there are a couple of housekeeping notes before we do that I do want to make you aware of. First, they will take you through their presentations. At the end of this presentation, we are going to go into breakout rooms. Those breakout rooms will be automatically selected. They're about 4 to 8 people, somewhere in that general area. And you will go into there. You'll talk about what you learned. Dr. Jeffrey will give you the questions at the very end that you should be discussing. And in that context, you'll also have some time to do some networking with the people that you meet in there. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Dr. Angela Jeffrey from JLL. And Angela, please, welcome.
Great, thank you very much. So before we get started, Adam and I just wanted to acknowledge that COVID is not the biggest problem on a lot of people's minds right now. And as a company at JLL, we stand for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are heartbroken by the racial injustice impacting the Black community right now and for years past. So our JLL values and culture demand respect and inclusion for all, and we absolutely don't tolerate anything less. So we just wanted to acknowledge that because it seems like at this point, COVID seems yesterday with everything going on in the world today. But with that, we did also talk about, we need to stay true to the topic that was advertised. So we will talk about how we're thinking about re-entry and all the things that we've sort of pivoted toward. And actually some of the things that we've done as a response to COVID also are very applicable in the world of racial injustice because of the focus on well-being and employee health. So with that, I'll just give you a little bit of background on JLL. And for those of you who are not familiar, so last year we reported $18 billion in revenue. We have about 92,000 people worldwide, which are in 300 corporate offices. We manage about 4.6 billion square feet in portfolio, and we're in about 80 countries. So a very, very large professional services firm that specializes in real estate. And we are honored to have many awards for the things that we've done, especially around being a great ethical company, being a diverse and inclusive company, and one of the most admired companies as recognized by Fortune. So that's just a little highlight of JLL. So in February, it was very interesting before COVID came about. The global talent team all met in Chicago. And actually, our colleague flew in from Singapore. Another colleague flew in from Paris. We had our total global talent team meeting together to write our 2020 priorities. And at this point, we didn't know COVID was happening. So, I mean, we did in China, but we thought that it was going to stay contained in China. We had no idea what was about to hit us in the rest of the world. So our top priority in February was to hire 30,000 quality people quickly. In 2019, we hired 30,000 people. We expected that number to be the same because of our growth strategies in 2020. So that was our number one top priority, was hire 30,000 people quickly and get quality quickly. When March 15th came around, we completely changed our priorities. So these are the new priorities, which then centered really around creating a great people experience for the people that are at JLL, our internal employees. So shifting from a focus on bringing external talent in to focusing on our own internal talent, upskilling and reskilling them for the future, because a lot of what our research and consultancy at JLL show is that COVID could actually increase going to the future of work. So given everything that's happening and the big pull on technology and digital solutions, we could actually end up speeding up. So how do we upskill and reskill our talent so that they are ready for that future and are able to pivot and work in the new world? how do we grow our diverse pipeline? So this priority used to be, again, around like hiring diverse folks and then creating an inclusive environment. With the COVID pandemic and the fact that hiring completely slowed and we were trying to free up cash for the company, it became, again, more internally focused. How can we grow our diverse talent into bigger roles within JLL? And we completely dropped off the hire quality people quickly and pivoted to hire responsibly. So our strategy at JLL has been to keep as many jobs as possible and keep as many people employed as possible during the crisis and during the tough times. So with that, it became less important to hire. And then we pivoted to, yes, there are a couple positions we still need to go for that are client facing, that our clients are reimbursing us for, and we will still hire those. But our first priority is to redeploy the talent that exists today who may get displaced with the current crisis. And all of this you can see grounded in cost management. Is at a time when, you know, JLL is feeling impacts just like every company out there, where we need to make sure that we are saving every penny that we can and investing wisely the money that we do have. So complete pivot, and the team responded exceptionally well to this. And, you know, things that were on their priority list that they, you know, wrote in February, then were kind of crossed out and put these new things in for in March for the rest of the year. And one of the big things we did around creating a great people experience centers around these people care initiatives. So we had planned to do a great new learning platform, and to make sure that we have virtual learning available, that we have best-in-class virtual learning available. We sped that up, and Adam will talk a little bit more about that. With COVID coming at us, we pivoted quickly to give a lot of resources on remote working, on handling stress, how to handle, and even how playlists on, you know, how do you improve your mental health during this time? How do you improve your physical health? How do you improve your financial health? So we did a lot of webinars right from the beginning, and then the redeploy talent strategy. So it is a way to upskill and reskill, in addition to just making sure that we're doing the right thing for our talent within the company. We had a big push for leading from the front, so educating leaders on how to lead during crisis. Our big leadership development program is called Real Leadership. We used to have that in person. We changed it all to be virtual. So we didn't stop it from happening. We just pivoted to make all of that training virtual. We started asking our people how they were feeling about our response, and immediately we started putting a question of the day on our intranet site. We did realize that we weren't reaching everyone with our intranet site, because many of our employees don't go to the intranet. Many of them are on client sites and not even using a JLL computer or going on any kind of JLL platform. So then we just conducted a full survey of the entire population. We put out QR codes. We had tried to get as creative as possible to reach as many people as possible. And actually just recently analyzed our results. We heard from 50,000 employees, which is fantastic. So now we have a lot of insight into what we're doing well and what we still have opportunity to do better. And then frequent and transparent communications. So we've been encouraging all of our leaders to make sure that they're communicating as frequently as possible, that they're, and even actually now with the racial injustice too, just make sure we're reaching out to our colleagues and friends around the JLL world, picking up the phone and saying, hey, how are you doing? How can I help you? And rather than just, you know, stick with everything okay, because, you know, often that's our tendency, because we don't want to hear bad news, but we're really pivoting to try and get people to say, what can I do to help you? What can I do to make your life better right now? And then finally, promoting well-being. So we are in the real estate business. We've put out a lot of tips on safety practices, how to safely re-enter, how to keep social distance, which one of the feedback we received early on, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, is, hey, if you focus so much on health and safety, then you are getting rid of the employee experience and it doesn't feel good to come back into the office. Well, we're a real estate company, so it's really important that people feel good coming back into the office. So we put out a lot of, advice and material on how to make the experience of returning to the office much more positive. And then we did a lot around well-being, which Adam will take through in more detail. So I'm going to pass it over to Adam to talk through our JLL virtual learning and our well-being platforms.
Great, thanks Angela, and good morning everyone. So just a little bit more information on some of the materials Angela just mentioned. So the first one around JLL virtual learning, I'm sure all of us are in environments where virtual learning or remote learning is not a novel concept, but pivoting from, maybe a mix of instructor-led programming that used to happen in a facility to completely being virtual is a pivot that we had to make, and we had to make it, pretty much overnight. So we strategically moved one of our big priorities around, partnering with an external platform to bring to life thousands of assets that would help our employees, grow their skill was an important priority for us. And we heard from our business leaders, hey, there might be some downtime, because they're not on client sites, they're not, in the kind of day-to-day activity. So how do we ensure they use this time strategically to grow their skill, to really empower themselves to develop their careers and where they want to go in the future? So we launched that in April, and almost 2 months earlier than we expected, and the adoption has been quite incredible. Many thanks to our global L&D team, some of them who are joining here today on the phone. But I think the key takeaway for anybody who's thinking about that pivot is really making sure that whatever you're doing in the learning space does pivot quickly to adapt to the needs of what the business is thinking about. So it wasn't just just giving them the same old. There was I think at this point we are at 9 or 10 new virtual classroom programs that also are part of this platform to say, hey, as part of our leadership development series, what else can we do to grow our leaders, about giving them, tips, best practices around how to manage a remote workforce, how to build client relationships remotely, et cetera. So the whole pivot to a 100% virtual learning platform was a key part of ensuring that our people knew that, while we're in this transition period, they have access to the best in class training, and they can spend time growing and developing their careers, not only for what's important to them right now, which might be like how to work remotely, but also in the future going forward. So the next piece that Angela touched on was well-being. So, a lot of what we were hearing quite quickly was, wow, this is stressful, right? Whether I'm stressed about just the economic climate that's around me, whether I'm stressed about, having to manage remote working plus maybe homeschooling. I hadn't had to teach my kids before. Maybe I have kids at home that, I lost childcare because they're also having to quarantine themselves. There was a lot of stress in the system from our employees and from our leaders across the world. So another thing we quickly pivoted to was really creating a hub that we call JLL Wellbeing, which is centered around physical, mental, financial, and inclusion well-being. And behind all 4 of those pillars were resources, trainings, which I mentioned in the previous slide, and a variety of different kind of on-demand resources, like an app, for example, that our employees could take advantage of around just how to take moments throughout your day to kind of recenter yourself and meditate, and a variety of other things that were within the app. But this was a huge win again for our employees, because they were craving some type of resource, some type of way to anchor into what can I do to stay sane? What can I do to ensure that I'm able to stay productive at work, but also manage the expectations of my personal life. And I think it was this one in particular is also relevant to the times we're living in right now, as people are still thinking about, okay, now we're moving out of COVID, moving into social injustice. How can I continue to center myself and manage the variety of expectations from myself personally and professionally? So this one, again, launched very similar timing from the JLL virtual learning platform. Again, we're seeing quite a big uptick in our adoption across the board globally, as well as participation in the webinars that we've been hosting around those 4 different pillars. So that was kind of the 2 things we want to talk about in the people care agenda. What we want to talk about next was how are we positioning the reentry experience, right? So on the title slide, you saw it, reimagine reentry. At JLL, the talent team has taken a really kind of new pivot, not only to support our employees, but also to partner with other parts of our organization we may have not traditionally done, which is, the actual workplaces, the building that our employees actually sit in, and helping them think through how should those employees come back to work, and the timing, and the, beyond just the safety tips of, making sure everybody has hand sanitizer. So what we were thinking through, and what we've been really purposeful in our thinking, is what we call empower and enable. So, again, it's beyond just having to make the difficult choice around, is the building safe enough? It's making that courageous choice of saying, how do our employees actually feel about coming back to work? And how do we ensure that our employees have a voice in that conversation? And so, as Angela mentioned in that survey we were doing, we were hearing a variety of concerns that our employees were sharing with us. So we wanted to make sure that our leaders had, the best tools, the best training, the best resources to help really drive those conversations. Again, there is, there is that physical safety part, but there's also the employee being able to feel like, I feel safe when I return back to my office. I have that ability to have that conversation with a manager to say, hey, these are my concerns, and making sure managers have, the strategic tools that they need to answer those questions and to give them flexibility where they need to. So to drive that, we, if you go to the next slide, we were thinking through kind of 3 different lenses on reentry. So, figure out, who is the most critical to return to work first in the reentry, strategy, and think through, their role requirements. What actually requires them to be in that job on site on day 1 when you enter your office? Are there roles that could be staggered later, right? Think through the criticality of that job requirement. Of course, we know there might be jobs that are preferred to be on site, but maybe there's still some flexibility as you think through that, right? So Angela will take you through a little bit more structure around, figuring out that who with our assessment, but who, and making sure that employees have, again, not part of that conversation, who, I'm raising my hand, I want to come back in, or actually I have a lot going on still at home. I'm still taking care of my kids, or I'm still taking care of, some personal situations that COVID has caused me to think through. The when, again, is around the timing and being responsible, right? You don't want to just open the door for all your employees to walk in at the same time. You're going to probably end up having to close it later as a result of that. So staging it responsibly and using those tools, again, from the who to help you think through the staggering of critical to, can come in at a later time. And then how is just, empowering our managers and our employees with those tips and best practices. So we've created a series of trainings, again, as well for our employees and managers around how to think about it. So when you're getting ready to go back to the office, here's some things that you should think about. Here's some ways that our corporate teams have thought about making our offices more safe, and giving them some psychological safety as they return back to the office. Again, we're all kind of making sure that we're anchoring back to those different initiatives, well-being, virtual learning, again, making sure our employees have total well-being as they walk back into the office. So I think,
Great.
we're going to I'm going to turn it back to Angela to talk about, there's different ways to think about the complexity of those three. So Angela, back to you.
Yeah, so one of the things we've learned through all of our surveying efforts is that there are people in very different states of mind. So a one-size-fits-all approach is not going to work. And to be perfectly honest, we inserted ourselves pretty hardcore into a lot of work streams that were already happening. So we heard, the health and safety team were meeting regularly to determine the safe reentry paths. But we wanted the employee experience to come top of mind, and we wanted people to be psychologically safe, so to feel the psychological safety. So if you just take everything from a lens of health and safety, it'll be a very different experience than if you take more of that human approach to things. So we do have plenty of employees at JLL, and I'm sure all of you have employees in your companies that are just excited to get back to the office. Interestingly, in our data, we're finding folks in Asia Pacific choosing this response far more often than other regions. And some of our hypotheses with that is often in many of the countries that we operate in Asia Pacific, they don't have, giant houses where they can have their home office and their spouse can have a home office and their kids can have, a different space to play in. Often they're in much smaller spaces where it's actually really, really difficult to get work done from home. So we are finding segments of our population who are incredibly eager to get back to an office space where they can be more productive. So that group, how we treat them and what we should be doing to get them back in the office is different than those who are saying, hey, I've got a lot going on. I would like to gradually come back in, maybe start with 1 day a week. And then go to 2. I don't maybe ever want to come back to 5 days a week, but that is a whole different profile of people. Then there are people that work for JLL, and I'm sure for many of your companies that are saying, I'm already in my usual office space. So those people who are, working in plants, for JLL, it's the frontline workers in buildings. The people that keep buildings running, regardless if there are people in them or not. So I'm already in my usual office place. There's no reentry for me. This is, where I've been all along. And then there are people that are saying, you know what, I don't feel safe on public transportation, or I have an immune compromised child, or I'm immune compromised myself. Or, I'm just feeling a lot of anxiety about everything going on, and I want to work from home 100%. And I think actually with all the racial tensions in major cities right now, this might be even coming out more loudly of like, I don't want to go into a city center right now. We don't know for sure because we haven't done that survey, but again, the whole point here is that our people are in very different spots, and our survey results will show that. We had roughly, a third of the population that is super eager to get back into a workplace as soon as possible. We have about 20% of the population that's like, I want to stay working from home 100% of the time. And then the rest of the people that are kind of in that in between stage where, gradually come in, or maybe they've never left the workplace to begin with. So, when we inserted ourselves into the process in saying, hey, people are in different states of mind, this was a bit novel for for some folks that were working on this, like, oh, right, that makes sense. Because a lot of us just think everyone wants to get back into work. And a lot of us think that because we feel a certain way, everybody feels that way. And that's not always the case. So the point here is that people are in different spots. We need to understand that. We need to understand where each of our people are, and then accommodate that. So what we said is, okay, there's the physical workplace assessment. This is done by a facilities manager that says, is the workplace ready to take people back into it? And you have to take into consideration even things like elevators, right, and big high rises. So if you say, hey, we can return in JLL, our headquarters is in the Aon Center. So if we said, hey, we can take 10% of the workforce back, then we have to think through the elevators. Like, how long will it take people to get to the 46th floor to the 48th floor of Aon safely in an elevator? And what are the elevator protocols that we need to follow? And all of that, is a lot of like kind of scenario planning and figuring out. And one of the scenarios that we ran, like, we realized it would take 6 hours just for people to get to work. Well, that's not going to work, right? So we need to figure out safely how many people can return to a given work spot, and then what are the protocols to keep the building safe. So this kind of assessment can be done by the facilities manager. It's kind of one time, and then they say, hey, we can accept 10% on this timing, and then 20%, and they have their timing protocol. Then there's a job duties assessment, which needs to be done by a manager. So what we have done is we've created out of Workday, which is our HR system, is a survey that goes out. So once they determine Atlanta is opening, I'm making this up, on June 5th, and they can accept 100 people, totally making this up, that's not real. Then the surveys would go out to each of the managers of people in Atlanta to fill out a job duties assessment to say, can the job continue to be done remotely, or does the person need to return in the first phase, the second phase, the third phase, etc. Once we've determined who is being slated for phase 1, then the employee will receive an assessment. And in here it takes into consideration not only their own health and their current situation, if they've been exposed to COVID, if they work with a frontline worker, if they work with someone in healthcare, et cetera, but also, do they have any other concerns? Do they have a concern about their commute? Do they have a concern about their own psychological safety, et cetera? And if for any reason they don't feel comfortable returning to work, then they shouldn't be coming in phase 1 if it can be avoided. And I guess I already talked about this, but the extra considerations are things like commute, childcare, if they're caring for a person at risk, et cetera. So all of these things, we wanted to point out that, like, it's not just simple, right? You shouldn't be just saying, the manager saying, oh, of course, this person's going to be more productive at work, so they need to return immediately. It's more complicated than that. And we do need to ask the employee themselves to get their point of view on how quickly or not quickly they want to return. And then I talked a little bit already about how to create a more positive experience. We created these just for ideas for people, for site leaders, for managers, it's just creative ideas on how to make the workplace as welcoming as possible. One of the feedback we received from one of our offices that we reopened in Europe is that they came in and it felt like a crime scene because there were, yellow tape everywhere crossing out desks, so because only every other desk could be used in order to keep the 6 feet of distance. And it just didn't feel good. And so then, day 1, a certain percentage of the workforce returned, and then they didn't return. So they chose not to come back in on day 2, day 3. Well, we don't want that to happen. We want people to come in and feel great about being at the workplace, wherever that happens to be. And so these are just, again, ideas to help people think creatively about what can you do. So maybe, put plants and beautiful things in the extra space. If you're closing off desks, rather than red tape, maybe put something beautiful there. Maybe turn it into yoga stretching places for people. So the people that are returning to work, they have space with their yoga mat and maybe, calming music, etc. So, and some people came back and they're like, well, we're not gonna, give cocktail kits out when some of the people, have had to take pay decreases and that sort of thing. Well, fine, but all of this can be personalized and be right for whatever given site in whatever given country and what their current situation is. But this is just to get people thinking about things that they can do to make the experience more positive. So with that, yeah, go ahead, Heidi.
Quick question.
Yep.
There was that came up in the chat. There was a question about the job duties assessment and a question as to whether you were using a template to help aid that process.
Yeah, so we just created 4 questions that again gets served as a survey in the Workday Cloud. And they say, can the essential duties of the job be done remotely? Is the person more productive in a workplace versus at home? Can we make other considerations? Can we do other things to make the employee more productive in a remote environment? And is there anything that we can purchase or do differently to make the remote working work better? So it's really trying to get managers to think through, think broader than like if the employee's big issue is that they don't have a second screen and so they feel like they're not productive. Well, can we do something to get them a second screen so that they can remain at home longer as we safely return in the phases?
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for Adam or me? Because I think we have the questions for the breakout rooms on the next slide.
Yep, and actually we, if folks want to unmute themselves, we have an opportunity for that to happen. So if there are any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, and hopefully we won't have folks talking over each other. All right. All right, well, then we can plan to tee up the breakout rooms.
Yeah, so for the breakouts, if you could take a picture of this or write it down, because I think once you're in the breakout rooms, you won't see this screen. But for conversation in your breakout rooms, here's some of the questions we're posing. So how has your people agenda changed in light of COVID-19? How have you prioritized well-being and helped your people during the pandemic? And after listening to some of the ideas from JLL, is there a priority you think you could remove or change to make your organization stronger or better to support your people?
Great, thanks, Angela.
Okay.
Ron,
I am ready if you are. Angela, Adam, thank you so much. We really appreciate everything that you guys offered today. I think it was really, really valuable, and I hope that the rest of you found it as valuable as we did. So as Angela and Heidi both said, we're going to be moving to breakout rooms. This is going to happen automatically. You are going to be put into different rooms. It will be done randomly. And we are getting ready to set that up right now. Here's a couple of things that we want you to know. We'll be sending you a message in chat, and we did find this out after the fact, Angela. As I told you, technology is not always my friend, but we will be able to send you a message, we believe, in chat that gives you about a 5-minute head start, knowing that things are wrapping up. And we're also going to try to send these questions forward to you through chat as well. We do want to remind you that we do have an event coming up July the 22nd. You can check Eventbrite for that, and we'd love to see you there as well. The breakout rooms and everything should start to shut down around 11:35, but just keep an eye on your chat feed, and you should be able to tell what is going on. Again, from everybody at Hacking HR, we greatly appreciate you joining us today. We look forward to seeing you in July. Angela, Adam, thank you again so much. I wish if everybody were here, I'd say let's give you a big round of applause, but they're on mute, so you're not going to hear anything. So we're going to, well, look, that Stacy Boyle throws up applause. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right, everybody, thanks again. We're going to head to our breakout rooms now, and Heidi and I will be communicating with you through chat. Thanks again to both of you, Angela and Adam.
Our pleasure.